Can you think of any situations where you changed your mind recently, where you realized that you were wrong, that you were mistaken? That doesn't happen that often, actually, does it? Even though our world is quite complex and a lot of topics are difficult to understand. One reason is that the confirmation bias often leads us astray, and today we will find out what that is about. Welcome to the Soft Skill channel. My name is Sebastian Jung, and today I'd like to introduce a very well-known and basic and fundamental bias, the confirmation bias. So, what is it about? A situation is like this. There is a topic and we have already formed an opinion on that topic. Now we receive new information. Information that confirms our opinion. We will treat quite favorably. We will easily believe it and regard it as important and trustworthy. And information that contradicts our opinion, that we will treat quite critically and try to dismiss it. Imagine, for example, that your favorite tech company launches a new smartphone. It's the greatest company ever, and you're sure this new smartphone will be great as well. And you watch a review on YouTube, and the review is super positive, and you say, yeah, obviously, greatest smartphone ever, as was to be expected. Then by chance you stumble upon another review, and that one is quite critical. And you say, well, that's a rather dubious channel, and their test procedures are questionable, and their criteria are really far-fetched. And this tester, I think he's probably a fan of the competing brand. And yeah, there's always something people complain about that's just normal. The important thing to understand is the confirmation bias is a systematic error in reasoning. So it's not that we consciously twist the facts to our liking, but we lie to ourselves without even realizing it. When it's about biases and fallacies, the books by Rolf Dobelli are always a good point to start. The Art of Thinking Clearly, I have the German edition here, but there is an English one available where he discusses individual biases and fallacies, and of course this also includes the confirmation bias. Dobelli calls it the father of all biases and fallacies, and he devotes 2 chapters in his book to it. He has some nice examples. One which I found nice and a bit funny is, imagine we are trying out a new diet. And every day we check our weight to see if it works. Now, if our weight has decreased, we say, wow, the new diet is awesome, it works great. However, if our weight has increased, we say, well, that's just natural fluctuations. Maybe I ate a bit too much yesterday. This is normal. This is an exception. And even though our weight stays the same over time, we still believe the diet works great. And it's the same in a business. Let's say management has implemented a new strategy. Whenever the results are great, whenever the numbers are great, management will say, yeah, that's our awesome new strategy, working like a charm, we did so well. However, if the results are bad, if the numbers go down, they will say, oh well, yeah, that's an exception, that's some special case, that's just fluctuation. Dobelli points out that the confirmation bias works best when the assumption itself is a bit vague. So, for example, those general, rather vague beliefs about how the world works, like all people are basically good or all people are inherently evil. No matter which of those you believe, you will always find examples that confirm your belief. And the same is true for the glass is half full or the glass is half empty, optimistic or pessimistic worldviews. You will always find confirmation. This mix of vague assumptions and confirmation bias is often exploited consciously or unconsciously. For example, when a business journalist writes an article. Let's say I have to write an article and I say, well, Google is successful because they have a culture of creativity. Then I find 2 or 3 other companies that have a culture of creativity and are successful, and voila, my assumption has been proven and the article is finished. And I don't have to bother the reader with the fact that there are plenty of companies that are successful without a culture of creativity or that have failed completely despite a culture of creativity. And the same is true if I am a guidebook author, if I want to advertise the fact, for example, that a meditation makes people happy. I will just find some positive examples and be done. And I don't care about all the people that are happy without meditation or that are unhappy despite meditation. And of course, in religion and esotericism, we often encounter this mix of vague assumptions and confirmation bias. Dobelli provides some good advice about how to deal with the confirmation bias. First hint from myself, as you might recall from other videos, if we know about a bias or fallacy, if we know that it is there, if we know how it works, unfortunately, this will not cure us of this bias or fallacy. We will still make the same mistake. So what Dobelli recommends is that we make our beliefs conscious, for example, by writing them down, and then that we consciously try to falsify them. For example, if we believe that people are inherently evil, that we consciously look out for examples that prove that people can also be good to falsify this belief. And Dobelli also warns against ideologies. And I think this is a great advice. He says we should always ask ourselves the question, what specifically would have to happen for me to change my beliefs? And if you can't come up with anything, you are probably the victim of an ideology. I came upon some more interesting information about the confirmation bias on Wikipedia. For example, I learned that the person who coined the term and the concept of the confirmation bias was a psychologist called Peter Racine, who was active in the 1960s. And he performed an interesting experiment. This experiment is often quoted, often described in videos and articles and so on about the confirmation bias, so I thought it would be good to include it. The experimenter provided a sequence of 3 numbers, this one, 2, 4, 6, and told the participants, this sequence of numbers is based on a rule, and your task is to figure out this rule. And to that end, you can give me other sequences of numbers, and I will tell you whether they fit the rule or whether they don't fit the rule. So you might say, for example, all right, 6, 8, 10. And I would tell you, oh yes, that fits the rule. And you might say 3, 5, 7. And I would say, yes, fits the rule. And at that point, a lot of participants said, all right, I figured it out. It's always +2. Or participants came up with really exotic and far-fetched ideas like the middle number is the average of the first and last. And barely any participant figured out the actual rule, which is just numbers in an ascending order. And the reason is that they didn't try to falsify their theories, but they merely thought confirmation for it, and then they said, all right, I figured it out. And after that experiment, Wason coined the term of confirmation bias, and he described it as a preference for information that is consistent with a hypothesis rather than information which opposes it. I should add that this experiment clearly wasn't perfect. There were some problems with it, and it's a bit outdated. But as I said, it is frequently mentioned in discussions of the confirmation bias, so I thought you should know about it. Another interesting piece of information on Wikipedia is a distinction between different kinds of confirmation bias, or between different situations where it occurs. First of all, we have biased search for information. And I think this is the category Peter Wason's experiment belongs to, where people tried to confirm their theories and thought for variations that confirmed it rather than trying to falsify it. And it's probably something we encounter when we research a topic on YouTube, and we see the thumbnails of videos and the titles of videos, and we might prefer to click on videos that sound like they go in the direction we like, that they have a similar opinion than the one we have already formed. The second kind is a biased interpretation of information. This is what I already described, where we treat information that confirms our beliefs more favorably than information that goes against our existing beliefs and opinions. All of the examples from Dobelli and my initial example about that new smartphone, they all belong in that category. And finally, there is the biased recall of information. There was an interesting experiment that showed how that worked. In that experiment, the participants were given the profile of a woman with a lot of characteristics, a lot of information about her preferences and so on. And some of those specifications seemed to hinted at a more introverted personality. Maybe things like likes to spend the evening at home with a good book. And other characteristics hinted at an extroverted personality. Maybe things like likes meeting new people. Now, after participants had time to read and to get acquainted with this profile, in the next step, they were told that this woman had applied for a job, and they were asked to recall any information about that woman that they still remembered. Now, some participants were told this woman had applied for a job as a librarian, and those participants primarily recalled those characteristics of the woman that hinted at an introverted personality, since that seemed to match the job. And the other group, other participants, were told that the woman had applied for a job as a real estate saleswoman, and those participants primarily recalled characteristics that hinted at an extroverted personality, though they specifically recalled that information that seemed to fit the current situation, and that is biased recall of information. Now, I think we have acquired a good basic understanding of the confirmation bias, so I would like to take a brief excursion. You might remember Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, who have contributed a lot to research on biases and fallacies, and we have already had a look at Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. That is a great source on such topics. Now, in Kahneman's book, the confirmation bias isn't specifically discussed, but Kahneman describes how our mind works and the mechanisms that are at work, and I think there are a lot of parallels, and I find that interesting, so I would like to present some of them to you. Please note that this is not like the established sources or reasons for the confirmation bias or anything like that. It's just things I regarded as interesting. First of all, I should briefly mention, Kahneman describes the mind as having two ways of working, two systems, system 1 and system 2. System 2 is what we use to consciously think about something, where we really invest some effort, where we focus on something. Our conscious thought, this is me thinking, this is system 2. System 2, it takes some work, some effort, so it is often on standby. System 1, on the other hand, is permanently active. For example, it filters all the impressions we get from our senses and permanently checks, is there something unusual, is there some danger? System 1 is permanently active, and it works in a very fast and effortless way. And this is realized by using a lot of little tricks, a lot of little shortcuts, a lot of tricks that allow System 1 to get decent results without a lot of effort. And those mechanics are the reason for a lot of biases and fallacies. For example, one mechanic that System 1 uses is association. If we come upon any piece of information, if we see anything, hear anything, remember anything, immediately other memories that are similar to what we just observed are activated. And of course, this makes perfect sense. This is quite plausible. The problem with this is, if someone asks me, is Sam friendly? I will recall different situations, different memories will pop up than if someone asks me, is Sam unfriendly? If I'm asked about Sam being friendly, I will recall situations where Sam acted in a nice way. If I'm asked about Sam being unfriendly, I will recall situations where Sam acted in a bad way. And actually, it would make way more sense if I would, no matter what the question specifically is, recall all cases that allow me to form an opinion about Sam's behavior. But that's not how it works. Now, it wouldn't be so bad if I was aware of that, and if I would say, all right, you asked me if Sam is friendly. I just remembered 3 situations where Sam was super nice, but I am aware that this is not the whole of Sam's behavior, and I should take a moment to consciously think about other situations that might have occurred. But this is exactly what we don't do due to another mechanic, another characteristic of System 1, one that is so important and common that Kahneman coined an abbreviation for it, Visiati. What you see is all there is. We are never really aware that we are only dealing with a small fraction of the important information. We always believe what we have in mind right now is everything that is there, everything that is important. So basically, someone asked us if Sam friendly, 3 situations pop in our head where Sam was friendly, and we say, oh yes, Sam is a super nice guy, even though that might not be the whole truth. Another mechanism that I find extremely interesting and important is, if we are faced with a very difficult question, with a question we have trouble answering, System 1 will often answer a similar, easier question instead, often one that is connected with a lot of emotion. So for example, if we are faced with a question, is this information true? Is this source trustworthy? This is quite difficult to answer. We probably would have to do some research in order to answer that. But what we can easily answer is, would I like this information to be true? Would I prefer this source to be trustworthy? And often this is the question that System 1 answers instead. A third and final mechanism I would like to mention is also quite interesting, and that is our mind doesn't like ambiguity. Our mind prefers everything to be coherent, to fit together, to match. And there is quite an interesting study about that. In this study, participants were asked in questionnaires about their opinion on various technologies. Things like chemical plants, food preservatives, cars, and other technologies. Technologies that all have in common that they have a big and important benefits, but also considerable risks. Now, the first interesting thing was, and that was also what the questionnaires were about. Where do you see benefits? Where do you see risks? Now, the first interesting thing was, when they checked the questionnaires, the scientists noticed that a person either liked a technology or disliked a technology, and in both cases, they had a very coherent opinion about it. So people who liked the technology believed that it had great benefits and negligible risks. And people who disliked a technology thought that it had considerable risks, but they also didn't think there were any real benefits to it. And even more important, even more interesting was the second step. After checking those questionnaires, the participants were shown videos about the technologies they were asked about. Those people who liked the technology saw a video that taught them about the risks that were connected with this technology. And then they were given another set of questionnaires, and their opinion was checked again. And it turned out, after learning about the risks, they saw more risks related to their technology, but at the same time, they saw less benefits, even though they didn't learn anything new about the benefits. But since they didn't like the technology all that much anymore, they seem to think, well, if it's not that a good technology, it probably doesn't have that much benefits. And it worked the same way around for the other group. For the people that disliked the technology, they saw a video about the great benefits, and after that, they thought the benefits were greater, but they also thought the risks were lower, even though they didn't learn anything new about the risks. And that I find extremely interesting. I would like to take a second brief excursion, and this time into our modern digitalized world, because it may be that the confirmation bias we already have is further reinforced by technology. We have two concepts that might be relevant here, and those are filter bubbles and echo chambers. Now, both are quite complex topics by themselves. Maybe there will be individual videos about them some point in the future. Now I can, of course, only touch them really briefly, but I would like to mention them because they are might be related to our topic at hand, to the confirmation bias. So what are they about? An echo chamber is if I am, for example, on social media and I join a group of like-minded people, a group of people who all have a similar opinion than myself, who have similar beliefs as myself. And now when there is a discussion in this group and I say, yeah, this is my opinion, everybody else would say, yeah, great opinion, best opinion, I totally agree, you are right. So my beliefs, my opinions are reinforced. There is rarely ever any contradiction. There aren't any critical questions because all those people in the group have a similar belief as myself. And this is what an echo chamber is. Now, a filter bubble we encounter on also on social media, on platforms like YouTube. Now, on YouTube, the company's idea, Google's idea, is that we should spend as much time as possible on YouTube because that's what generates their revenue due to advertising. So They want us to spend lots of time, so they try to present videos to us we are likely to click at and to watch. And to this end, they use an algorithm that uses the data they have about us and also our viewing history, so the videos we have watched in the past. And this algorithm will present to us videos we probably like, we probably are interested in, where there is a high probability that we will click them and watch them. Now, obviously, those videos, since they are based on our viewing history, are similar to those we already watched. They represent similar opinions, similar beliefs, as represented in the videos we watched before. So here again, we always get more of the same. We get confirmation for our beliefs, for our opinions, and we aren't faced with criticism, critical questions, contradictions, and so on. Now, both the filter bubbles and the echo chambers are controversial topics, and there is no definite research about them, no clear final results. But of course, there are obvious risks at work here. First of all, if our opinions are always reinforced, if we always get confirmation for our beliefs, there is a high risk that our opinions will grow more dogmatic, more radical over time. And a second, if we always get confirmation, if our YouTube page is full of videos that all advertise the opinion we already have, we might get the impression that our opinion is an established and widespread opinion. Even if it is a far-fetched conspiracy theory, we see plenty of videos that all say it is true and trustworthy, and that, of course, will give a quite wrong impression. So the confirmation bias that we already have might be further reinforced by modern technology. And this makes it all the more important to know about the confirmation bias, to understand this bias and be aware of it. And I hope that my video was helpful in that regard. We will see each other in the next video. For today, I'll take my leave. Have a nice day. See you next time.